these crafts might be um, not from Earth.
Hmm. Well, the fact of the matter is that, and I don't know, maybe I'll repeat myself again, but
Okay.
if in an objective sense, if you look at what, let's say we look at 100 sightings. So there's 100 sightings that are made of objects that people see in the sky. And all the research that we have, and it's been proven quite readily that 95 out of 100 sightings are misidentifications. They're either stars or meteorites or meteors or airplanes, balloons, whatever you have it. 95 out of 100, but five of those sightings, categorically and data-wise, are not of Earth origin. They are what we would call UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena. We just cannot explain where they're from. And at that point, what we do know is that segments of the government and our researchers who've been involved in this for well over 70 years themselves, we can categorically prove that the propulsion systems that these craft had, that 5%, once again, have propulsion systems and maneuverability characteristics far beyond anything that we have. There's nothing that can compare to the speeds these things travel. They travel at 15, 20,000 miles in our own atmosphere without burning up, without making a sonic boom, reversing courses, hovering, doing things, making right angle turns that if we did that in our own aircraft, the people on the inside would be crushed to death.
They'd be liquefied. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. And when you asked about what the government knows, they know that the propulsion systems that these craft utilize are arcane. They just don't know what it is. Some people say it's anti-gravitic, electromagnetic, it's using free energy of some kind to manipulate airspace in front of them. All kinds of things that categorically prove that nothing on Earth, to this point, anyways, can replicate the kinds of maneuvers that these craft exhibit. They come and go with impunity. And the basic reason that this happens is because they've got energy systems at their disposal, whoever they are. We're talking now
Yeah.
extraterrestrials. So it's a matter of finding out exactly, specifically what the government knows, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
So in these crafts, they seem to come in a different variety. It seems like,
Hmm.
some seem to be solid, and then others seem to be some kind of, I don't know how to put it, like interdimensional. Just they seem like they're all energy, I guess, somewhat.
Well, yeah, and that points to the fact. I think you brought up a very good point. It points to to a couple of things. First of all, and let me try to sort of put this in several categories. The first category of what these things might be, it has you have to look at it from the point of view of the number, if in fact what's going on, the number of off-world civilizations that we're dealing with. Let's start at that point.
Okay.
And the assumption here is that the universe, the cosmos itself, is literally teeming with life. There's millions of stars out there and billions of planets out there. Not all of them, have the capability to move from point A to point B at or beyond the speed of light, or whatever that might be. So you've got the one aspect of moving from point A to point B in the cosmos within the universe, traveling at or beyond light speed to get here. Now those craft, however they're configured, are generally speaking sort of hard objects. If one were to land, you could probably knock on the door and say, "Hello, is anybody in there?" So you've got this kind of rock solid metallic kind of craft that might show up in our atmosphere, and this is what a lot of people are seeing. Okay, that's one category. Which represents one level of intelligence of the people or the beings that actually operate these solid craft. And then you bring up that the other point is the energetic formulation of some of these crafts. Some of these craft exhibit almost like an amorphous characteristic. You can they're buzzing energy. There's no craft and no solid component to them. And it's really kind of bizarre. They just show up and they come in balls of light or whatever, and that's the way they exist. And they may, in fact, represent a different level of off-world civilizations at a different level of intelligence. And then you've got this other thing that you just mentioned that they may be interdimensional. These things,
Yeah.
some of them may, in fact, be able to move within dimensions and time. And that to me is something extremely complicated to wrap my mind around. But you can't rule out the possibilities of different levels of intelligence in different parts of the cosmos of beings that are at all different levels of existence. Some are a million years old, some are 10 million years old, some are 50 million. We just don't know. So each one of those categories of off-world civilizations represent different kinds of craft that may in fact be visiting us, not just now, but probably on Earth for hundreds and thousands of years. So to answer your question, they come in all forms and from places that we can't even imagine. Some people they say, well, maybe it's an alternate universe, which is in fact true. Now the fact is, it really kind of important is that if you can think it, it could be possible. So if these things are time travelers, but that's one component of it. If these things are interdimensional, that's another component. Now, if you speak to some of the people who have experienced contact with these beings, the abductees that we talk to, that or our contactees that we speak to, they have their kinds of references or descriptions of who these beings might be. Some of them are light beings, some of them are physical beings, beings that look like you and I.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of things that point to the fact that there is a number of different civilizations that are interacting with us. So, and that's part of the problem in understanding this because it's not just one thing or just another. It's a multiplicity of things that are engaging us both in a craft wise, craft basis, and with the beings that are actually housed in those craft in many different ways.
And so after all these years of sweeping this under the rug and making people look crazy to even talk about it, why all of
Hmm.
a sudden are they coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, they're real and we've been interested
Hmm.
in them"? What do you? Because I just don't trust them.
Well, neither do I. I trust them, but only so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing, it's a really good question. Why has the secrecy lasted so long? It might be a good place to start. Initially, when this all first started, when quote unquote governments or the military became aware of this stuff back in the mid 40s, and maybe even before that. I mean, there's the one kind of bookmark in history is 1947 when the crash near Roswell, New Mexico happened, and the planes near Corona, New Mexico. That seems to be the benchmark of the first contact, but we know that things happened in 1942. But irrespective of all of that, that's when the government officials, mainly military at the time, began to realize that, holy smoke, we got something on our hands here that we have no clue what's going on. So what they did was, in order to kind of keep this stuff hidden, is they created the cover-up because they just did not know what was going on. Some people had an idea as to what was going on. Some people who were there at the crash site, for example, in Corona, knew what was going on. They had a craft that they couldn't explain. So they covered it up. They just didn't know what to make of it. Beings, bodies, that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So if they started to use that kind of language in the general public, what would have happened would prove that the United States government, to begin with, if in the framework of just the American experience, would kind of indicate to the general public that the U.S. military had no control over these craft. They could come and go with impunity. And for the United States Air Force or the military at the time to admit that they were not in charge of their own airspace, that would have been the death knell of any possible remnants of their capability, or to convince the American public that they knew what was going on, because the war had just ended, and the United States had proven itself to be the superior military force throughout the world. They had the best air force, they had the best military on the ground and on the seas. They were number one in the books, and all of a sudden, one of these craft comes along, and pretty much to the chagrin of all these military officials, pretty much shoot that down. they had to admit if they did go forward and talk about UFOs being real at the time and beings coming from another place, that would have made them look far less superior than they thought they were. So that was one of the reasons why the cover up began in that way. They just could not wrap their minds around allowing the public to believe that the United States of America, who had just won the First and Second World War, and the power that they had, were a second-rate force compared to what these craft were. And then after that, in the early 50s, waves and waves of these things began to come forward, mostly because of the detonation of the atomic bomb back in the early 1950s. The idea that these craft began to come in so many great numbers, especially 1952. There's a huge wave, and if your audience wants to check that out, there's a huge UFO wave in 1952. And what the conclusion there was that these off-world civilizations had somehow figured out or noticed that the planet Earth now had atomic power, which in some ways each detonation sent out shock waves from the planet. Believe this or not, but this is the common scenario that's been told about it. Um, and they didn't like that. These off-world civilizations did not appreciate the fact that the planet Earth had this kind of nuclear capability, and it disrupted everything that they knew to be proper. And it was something that was such a weaponized situation that they said, well, let's just see what these people are up to, and have a look at what the capabilities are in terms of these nuclear weapons. And would these nuclear weapons have the possibility of destroying this particular civilization? A, and B, if these people, if us, began to travel in space, would we take our nuclear weapons with us to be a threat in an off-world capacity? And they just wouldn't allow that. So they had to look see as to what the heck we were doing. And I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with a man named Jim Mars. He
Oh
wrote,
yeah.
yeah, several books on this. And one of the reasons that he thinks these UFOs began coming in droves in the late 40s and 50s is these off-world civilizations said to themselves, "Oh my goodness, the kids have found the matches."
Yeah.
And if you can wrap your head around that one, which as it turns out, I've spoken to Jim. I've interviewed Jim before he passed away several times on the radio program that we had, and he was one of the most articulate and well-read and well-versed and best one of the best researchers ever in all of this. And his perspectives were pristine, and they were very, very intellectually framed in a way that he could speak to the common man, but he could also speak at different levels of intelligibility with people. So he had a really good perspective on why these extraterrestrials were here, and just to have a look and see. So that's probably part of the reason why the government began to cover things up to the point where they just didn't know what was going on. And then after that, once they kind of got a sense as to what these things might have been, because pilots were seeing them, they were giving reports, commercial pilots were seeing these things, and they said, "My goodness, we just cannot talk about these things." So the United States Air Force went completely and totally silent on it with Project Blue Book, and just explaining every single sighting as weather balloons or weather anomalies or whatever you want to call them. But they would not admit that these craft were of substance with different kinds of propulsion systems that could outstrip any jet of the time or any other kinds of propulsion that we had. So it was in their interest to keep silent about it, not only keep silent, but create a wall or an embargo on the truth about what these things really, really were. And that perpetuated itself well to the end of the 20th century and now into the 21st century. Now that's changed a little bit. Maybe we can
Yeah.
get onto that a little bit, but that's the whole framework of the context of the cover-up. There are a lot of other reasons for it too, but that those are the major ones.
And what would be the geopolitical implications to disclosure?
Opening things up, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll go back to one of the things that I mentioned earlier
Okay.
is that, in fact, if they did have complete disclosure, which I don't think we'll ever get, I'll put that in parentheses at
Yeah,
this
I'm
point.
with you on that.
Yeah, what I call it would be acknowledgement. If the government, which it pretty much has right now, um, acknowledges these things. Now, as in 2017, and the article that came forward in the New York Times by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean and Helena Cooper, they got some pretty good information from inside the Pentagon. And the Pentagon had been conducting a research through the ATIP program. Luis Elizondo was one of the people in charge of that at the time, and it was operating because of a grant that or funding that was obtained by Senator Harry Reid. He obtained $22 million to get the ATIP program going. That was sort of an investigative program within the Pentagon. And that $22 million went a long way to uncovering some of the things that the Pentagon really knew about what was going on. And that program was discovered by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean and Helena Cooper, and they wrote about it. And how Harry Reid and his two other compatriots got the money, we don't know. But in fact, they wanted to find out what the Pentagon knew about it. And as of 2017, a lot of information is just the floodgates opened, and all of this kind of I'm not going to say disclosure yet, acknowledgement that the American government was in fact investigating in a very, very deep way that had never been discovered before, had never been articulated before. They were studying UFOs in a way that no one ever thought that they would, in the context of the huge cover-up. And they were always saying there was nothing to this. There is no such thing as these things. They were just, weather anomaly. But then again, the Pentagon's the truth really came out within the Pentagon, realizing that there were these craft of unknown origin. They didn't know where they were from, and they had no answer. So what they did was say, well, you know what? These things are, they are anomalies. They could be China. They could be Russian technology. All the answers began to come forward, other than the off-world explanation. So that kind of acknowledgement was that these things were really for sure, tangible craft that people could actually see, that pilots were seeing. And then once again, you got these the videos from the United States Air Force pilots, the Tic Tac videos that Luis Elizondo brought forward, and these really began to give an indication that these craft were really bizarre. And some of the characteristics coming out were actually, they proved what everybody knew at the time within the Pentagon. These craft were hovering above the water, 50 feet above the water, hovering.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, within less than a second, they were at 85,000 feet. Within the blink of an eye, in less than a second. And this happened time after time after time. And then it came out that these pilots not only saw these things once in a while, but there are pilots who have actually gone on the record and saying this happens every day. So that kind of information I don't really want to call it disclosure. I want to call it acknowledgement. The government acknowledged that this stuff was happening. Now, they didn't give an explanation about it, but they acknowledged this stuff was happening. So that began in 2017 and really opened the floodgates to have more and more kinds of interventions by the intelligence agencies and other congressional, I guess, bodies to look more deeply at it. So that's where we're at right now as a
Yeah.
result of what happened in 2017. So the geopolitical implications in the long term, and when you talk about geopolitics, that kind of means that in a way that if we do achieve any kind of quote unquote disclosure, it will mean that in some way or shape or form that other governments have actually found out the same thing. And we tend to be very myopic about this in the sense that the United States government sort of has a handle on everything, which in fact they got a handle on a lot of this stuff, and they want to appear to be sort of quote unquote in charge of this issue, which they're not really.
No.
Other governments have just as much information, and some governments may even have more. We're not quite sure. We know the French has. The French government has lots of information about this. We know the UK government has a lot of information about. We know Russia has a lot of information about this. So it's a geopolitical thing that once this thing called acknowledgement becomes total disclosure, that the whole global family will know what's going on, and that's probably the biggest geopolitical implication of it. And then after that, the questions geopolitically become, Well, who are they? Where are they from? How many species are we dealing with? What are the energy sources that are using? Are they a threat to us? And all of the questions that anyone would want to, conjure up in terms of trying to deal with the fact that we are in fact being engaged by off-world civilizations. And that's, you take that from the lowest level of understanding
Yeah.
of people that in the poorest countries on the planet to the highest level of sophistication and military intelligence. They're all going to ask the same questions. And then comes the question of, have we had contact with them before? As I said earlier, with the story about President Eisenhower meeting with them at Muroc Air Force Base. We don't know if that happened. There's a lot of information that some researchers have gotten about it. We can talk about that at length if you want, but we just don't know that for a fact. But the fact of the matter is, we know that the government realizes these things are not from this planet and that they have to protect that kind of entity under the guise of national security.
Well, yeah, and it's yeah. I kind of wonder why. If they didn't want us to know anything, if they wanted to be secretive,
Hmm.
obviously, I don't see how they couldn't do it. Right? I mean, they could move faster than a speeding bullet, if you will.
Right.
So, but they seem to, all the information we do get on them, they almost give us. It's like, it's like they'll play with people. They'll hover up there. They know that they
Yeah.
got to know they're being
Hmm.
seen.
Hmm.
So you got to wonder what is the end game with these guys? What's it all about?
What's their agenda, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, once again, I don't like to repeat myself, but when we look at the whole issue as a whole, we often look at it from too much of a from too close of an angle. We have to step back and look at it and deal with some of the intrinsic things that are going on. When we say what's their agenda, my emphasis would not be on the word agenda. My emphasis would be on the there. Who are they?
yeah,
So if it's one, if let's just take for example, if it's just one species, let's just say, just for argument's sake, if it's just one species, just one group of extraterrestrials from some far different planet, that's one thing. Okay, so it would be if that was the case, it would be much easier to ascribe any kind of agenda to that one species.
yeah,
Why are you here? What do you look like? What do you have for dinner? Do you have cars? Do you date? Do you go bowling? All of that stuff that's very, very, pedantic. How did you get here?
yeah,
Yeah, if it's just one species, that would be pretty easy to kind of deal with in terms of how the human family would want to attempt to understand what's going on. So, do you understand that? That's one
oh
perspective.
yeah,
But then,
yeah,
if you introduce the other perspective of a multiple number of extraterrestrial civilizations, then enters the question of, okay, fine. Let's just suppose, for argument's sake, there's 150. Okay, I'll just pick a number off the top of my head. If there's 150 different species that are out there that have made some sort of overtures, then you have to get into the argument: are they operating independently as each an individual civilizations of, they're coming here all by themselves and doing their own thing, okay? Or are they engaging the planet in a cooperative way? Are they together in this? Are they a federated group? Do they know what each other is doing in order to come here and say, okay, here, there's this planet Earth here. You visit them and we'll visit them, and we'll just sort of do our things together and not make ourselves known in the way they think we should. So there's that aspect too. So then the idea of an agenda becomes a little bit more important as to what they're up to. Okay, and and then there's the third aspect of it is, do they really care about this planet? Is something that there's a deep interest in? They may just walk by us and visit us like we'd walk by an anthill and look at it and keep on going.
I was
Uh,
thinking that same thing. The
yeah.
ants would look up and say, "Oh, they've been here for thousands of years."
Hmm. Yeah, exactly, precisely. So there's so many different ways of looking at this that it almost, when you look at it from the point of view of someone, as I spoke to earlier, um, it, who knows nothing about this issue, or has heard about it, but he really has no interest in it, does not realize the deep implications of it. For someone who really is not acquainted with this whole issue, these things mean very little to them, and and that's okay. I understand that, because everybody's got to, they mow their lawn, they go grocery shopping, they have their jobs putting food on the table, and this kind of stuff really doesn't bother them one way or another. And if you look at what the implications are, and if these things are in fact what we think they are, then we've got a lot of questions that rise to the surface. My big issue with all of this, probably is the number one issue, is the whole energy issue. What kind, if they're moving from point A to point B, from whatever planets they're from, star systems, they're using a form of propulsion. Let's just say it's A to B propulsion, antigravitic or whatever you want to call it. And if that is the case, these craft and their civilizations represent a source of energy that the planet Earth could very well use to resolve the climate and energy situation that we're in right now. All indications are that whatever this energy source is A, it's free, B, it's totally abundant in the cosmos. They draw the energy from what's called the quantum vacuum of space. It's called zero point energy, and this is how they propel their craft. How it works, who knows? But this is the predominant theory about how some of these metallic craft actually function. So from that point of view, if the global family begins to understand or gets to understand that this energy source could in fact resolve a lot of the issues with respect to our energy problems here on the planet, that's a big deal. That is a huge deal. So another reason why it's kept secret, well, if in fact these things are acknowledged and disclosure does happen, and if it does become common knowledge that these craft have this incredibly arcane and different and unique source of energy, my question is, and everybody's question is, what does this do to the oil industry? And how
Yeah.
many billions of dollars will remain hidden in the ground, inaccessible, and not be able to be used or not even wanted to be used because we've got this new form of energy, if we're ever informed about what this energy is. So there's a lot at stake. If UFOs are disclosed and the energy source becomes common knowledge, and if you're a Shell executive or an Exxon executive, you're shaking in your boots right now, because this energy, if it's shared with us in the right way, which some of these extraterrestrials seem to want to do, according to the contactees, the oil industry would fall overnight. Now, what happens geopolitically with that? What happens economically with that? What happens to all of the other kinds of things that we do on a day-to-day basis that endanger the climate on this planet? That all has to be reckoned with. So that's another reason why things are being kept secret. But it's another reason why we just have to bring it out into the open. And that's what part of my job is.
Well, I had read where they have, I guess, finally, I wouldn't say mastered, but they are now familiar with cold fusion,
Yeah.
and they're just figuring out, I guess, a way to do this or that. But I wonder if maybe they didn't learn something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's the cold fusion thing that just come onto the horizon recently, and 60 Minutes, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, had an excellent um, portrayal of it on one of their programs. And the thing about cold fusion is that uh, there two things happen. You will get out more energy than you put in. That's the basis of it. If you inject with a laser or whatever it happens to be energy into this cold fusion process, the amount of energy that you get out of it will be, a hundredfold more than what you put in. But the problem with that is creating the substance that you inject, or that you inject your source into, and it's so difficult to create this substance. They talk about 9,000 units of this thing having to be created every second in order for this cold fusion to work properly. And the multiplication numbers are just astronomical, that we just, at this point in time, we do not know how to produce the substance that's required to create this cold fusion. So we're at a point now where, I guess, you know, when they first discovered fire, okay,
Yeah.
well, how much wood do we really need in order to get this heat,
Yeah.
So it's that kind of argument. We're at a very, very elemental level about the development of cold fusion. Now, the other aspect of this, and I've mentioned it a little earlier, is this whole idea of anti-gravity technologies. And here is where the argument and the discussion or the narrative, whatever you want to call it, revolves around what we call the TR3B craft that people are seeing, these big black triangles. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure your listeners
I've
have seen
seen
that.
one of those. Yeah.
You have? Well,
I
there you
have.
go. Well, I've had it reported to me in many different ways. So that's great that you've seen one because what they seem to be showing us is that these craft have been in secret developed by the U.S. military. You know, once again, like the SR-71 way back in the 50s was something that no one knew about, and it would be flying in the sky, and people foretook it by as a UFO. I mean, they made that mistake back then.
Yeah.
The SR-71 is an ox cart compared to what these TR-3Bs are. These things use some sort of system of propulsion that there's mercury involved and spinning, whatever it happens to be, but they create some sort of anti-gravitic force field around which these craft can operate and cancel out gravity. So they're able to fly at very, very low speeds.
And they could
Very, very,
cloak.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they could
It's
they could blend right into the sky behind them. You wouldn't even know they were there.
exactly. So you have to wonder, A, where did the technology come from? How long have they been developing it, or working on it? And is it a transitional technology that's been learned by the reverse engineering of UFO craft that we kind of understand, but have been experimenting with, and all of a sudden you get these TR-3Bs coming onto the forefront, and they represent a corner of the technology that we need to find out about. So there's a direct correlation between the energy systems that these TR-3Bs use and some of the UFOs that we see. They're very, very similar in characteristics. So
And
there's it's like herding cats. You can't get them all together in a room to kind of decide exactly where you're at with the discussion.
well, now if we have them, I wonder how many other countries like China or Russia have these too. I mean, I guess some would say they
Yeah.
don't, just we do, but I don't know. They seem good at getting our secrets.
Well, that's a question that's up for grabs. The people that I speak to, and I know most of the really uh, well researched individuals
Yeah.
within this. I'm talking about the Richard Dolans of the world,
Oh yeah.
and Steve Bassett, and a
Hmm.
lot of the other researchers that I've been dealing with over the number of years. I know them quite well. They're my friends, and we talk a lot. And they're convinced that the United States government pretty much has a handle on this technology. They're not certain of it once again, but they think that the United States government has in one way or another commandeered this technology and they're producing it themselves. Now, are they sharing this information with their allies? Perhaps. Do they want to share it with their adversaries like Russia and China? Or have Russia and China commandeered it somehow and figured it out on their own? We don't know. The most of what we understand, these TR3Bs, they're experimented with, originated in the United States, and those are the craft that we're seeing. So the overall answer to the question is, do other countries have this? My answer to that would be no, or they may be at elemental stages of beginning to understand it. But if there's going to be a secret in terms of technology being kept hidden really, really well by the United States, you can bet your bottom dollar that the anti-gravitic technology that the United States has right now is a highly well-guarded secret.
Oh yeah, the one that I seen, I was with somebody else, so I didn't see it alone, and it was off in the distance in the sky, and the person I was with told me about it. So, oh, look at that, and I thought, nah, that's just the power poles. They got lights so the planes don't hit it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then it started moving, and so there was three orange lights. They were very
Hmm.
fluorescent in a
Hmm.
triangle shape, and so
Right.
at first all you saw was the 3 points of light.
Right.
And then the craft came into, I mean, this was like, so it seemed like I was watching a movie, I tell you.
Right.
It just appeared, and you couldn't see anything behind it. It was solid black. And then after about 30, 40 seconds, it went back to three lights and it started traveling. And we followed it for as long as we could. And then it went over the lake and was gone. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was amazing to see. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, well, if I could just recount a story that I experienced, it wasn't exactly like you've explained. Although I might say that any of the reports that I have had from people that I've spoken to, and that's probably right now who have actually seen these things. I've interviewed and spoken with, and these are just ordinary people, probably 8 to 10 people who've had a very similar kind of sighting as you did, and they describe virtually, what you've described. The situation that I was involved in, this was back in 1996, when my wife and we had I went on an excursion, a tri-state excursion. We went down to Nevada and to Arizona, New Mexico, and we visited Area 51, just outside of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And we were driving along Highway 375 as we were approaching Area 51. It's a flat desert, dark night, probably about 8:30, quarter to 9, and it's a flat desert. And there's mountains off to the right, the Tikaboo Valley, and then there's these huge mountains on the north. And my wife said, "What the heck is that?" And so we pulled the car over, and we got out, and up in the distance, above the mountains, probably the mountains were, I'm saying, 8 to 10 miles to the north of us. But this light was at about a 45-degree angle. And if you held a dime in your hand and held it out at arm's length, it was about that size. And it was a white light, kind of diaphanous. You could almost see through it. And it was steady. It
Yeah.
was just hanging there. And for a second, I thought, where's the moon? But it was far too small to be the moon. And it became diaphanous, as I said. You almost looked like a snowflake almost. And then as that happened, it began to spin. This light began to spin. And while it was spinning, it stopped, and then three orange lights within that white diaphanous circle appeared. And the white dot disappeared, but it just left three orange lights in a perfect triangle. And then these lights hung there for a second. This whole thing lasted probably 90 seconds. And then these three orange lights began to spin really, really fast, and faster and faster and faster. And then they coalesced back into the white dot again, and then just zipped off like in the blink of an eye, just not
Yeah.
moved, slowly. It just went at blinding speed. And we stood there and said, "What the hell was that?" We had no idea, and I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. I'd seen a lot of pictures of, UFOs or sighting reports that people would have sent me. Never seen anything like that. Now that's over Area 51 in the Nevada desert. So someone was fooling around with something.
Oh yeah.
So, and that was back in 1996. And that's not that long ago, relatively speaking. So you've got all kinds of experimentations going on and all kinds of things that people are seeing, and it's tough to really categorize it because they're just so different. Very few of them are exactly the same. That's one of the problems too.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many different kinds. There's these cigar shapes. There's these, I mean, everything. You look at the Phoenix Lights. I mean, all these
Right. Hmm.
incidents that have happened. For me, disclosure's already happened, and I didn't need the government to come out and tell me about it.
Yeah.
Although I'd like that. I'd like them to
Oh, yeah.
share the
That would be
information.
nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it would certainly be nice, but I never held my breath
Yeah.
for it. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah, when you say that disclosures already happened, I tend to agree with you in a lot of ways because one of the talking points that I really use a lot is that if you're paying attention to this issue, as you seem to be, and perhaps a lot of your listeners are too, if in fact, people like yourself are paying attention to this issue as closely as you and I are, we get a sense that we know something's going on. We know that it's not just something really, really simple on two fronts. First of all, because it's being hidden from us and kept from us as a lie, basically an embargo on the truth. That's one aspect of it. But intuitively and even scientifically, there's so much proof that this thing is. We don't need the government to tell us what's going on. We don't need to go to the government cap in hand and say, "Please tell us what's going on." We don't
yeah,
need that. We've got it in our own midst. But this whole idea of the government being quote unquote in charge of this issue, it would be nice for them to come clean and say, "Look, is there more to this than what we believe? And can we somehow share this information in a way that makes sense for everybody?" Or Oh, and here's the big one. I used to make this point all the time on the radio, and I got criticized for it roundly, but it didn't doesn't matter. Um, this thing, whatever it is, this phenomenon, could be so different than what you and I think it is. It could be something completely different than what we've been told it might be, or what it is, or that people know that it could be something that we just cannot imagine. The thought that's never been thought before. It could be that. I'm not saying that it is, okay, but it's the possibility of it being something that we don't expect is real. And I think that's part of the problem with disclosure. What are they disclosing to us, and is it the full story? And if there's more to this, other than what you and I believe intuitively, I want to know about it. And
Oh,
it's my right as a human being to know what's going on. The government doesn't have the right to keep this information from us because this is a question of truth, of a cosmic truth that we all, everyone in the human family needs to know about. And you have to, it begs the question is why is the secrecy still so strongly in place, despite the fact that all of this stuff seems to be coming forward, with all of the agencies and Director of National Intelligence and the spy balloons and all the stuff that's going on around there, around those issues. Uh, we don't need the government to do it, but it certainly would be to everyone's advantage for them to come clean and say, listen, here's what things are, and here's where we stand. And but are we ever going to get those answers? I don't know.
yeah, especially being that we're the ones who pay for all the research and things they do. It wouldn't be bad if you just
Precisely.
share a little bit with us, more than
Yeah.
just a Tic Tac UFO
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. You are our representatives. We will give you that, but you do not replace us. And
Yeah.
that's the key point here. That's the key point.
I mean, it's like the biggest, just two biggest questions, I guess, that ever hit us is, are we alone? And, where do we go when we die? And, it seems like at
Hmm.
least one of those questions is badly
Hmm.
being suppressed. The other one, I
Oh,
don't
for
know
sure.
if we're supposed to know in the first place, but
Yeah, a
yeah.
lot of theories about that, but I can't hang my hat on any one of them.
Hey, listen, I got to take a break here, quick,
Okay.
and then we'll be a few minutes. So hang on
Okay.
with me, and then we will come back, and you and I will talk some more, and we'll be off screen while we take this break. Folks, you're listening to The Last Frequency. I'm Mike Vara, and my guest, I told you he was good. He's going to be with us a little bit longer here, folks. Victor Viggiani, and I'm enjoying it myself. I hope you are too. Get over to our website. That is lastfrequency.com. Again, lastfrequency.com. Archives, they're there, all free. Everything's free for you. The video archives, free. Everything is free. I just ask occasionally, you want to release a little bit of the burden on me, then why not hit that donate button because it does help. And with that being said, I appreciate it. And I'm looking again to pick up another night here, slowly but surely getting things built back up. So let's get back to it. I guess if we do, yeah, I guess we can. If somebody does want to get a question, and there's a couple ways you could do it. Let me tell you, the easiest way right now would probably be the portal from our website at lastfrequency.com. You go to the portal tab, portal page, and you can send a question right through. I'll get it, and I will ask my guest. Now, if you want to call in, you may. The number given by Cal on coming back from the break, not quite correct. It is correct, but it's not up. So we're using another number tonight. That is 803 392 4566. Again, 803 392 4566. So we're back with it here. Victor, we have returned. And so I guess where do you see this going? I mean, you say you don't expect to see full disclosure, and I honestly don't either. I mean, but at some point, do these guys land and I mean, they're showing themselves up there. I mean,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
bother doing that if you're not gonna?
Well, yeah. The broader question of where this thing is going is a really good one. And if I could take a step back and look at for a second, Mike, for the number of years that I've been involved in this, and the number of years that a lot of the people that I know who are still involved in this, some a little bit longer than me, some a shorter period of time. And when you look at where we started back when I got involved in it in 1975, and the kind of I guess the kind of narratives that were in play back then, 40 some odd years ago, um, it's almost simplistic compared to where we are at right now. The answers are a little bit more clear, but not completely clear. There's a little bit more quote unquote truth to this whole thing. There's a lot more clarity to it, although we're not there yet. But when you compare where we are now to um, where we were back in when I was doing the radio program in the late 70s and 80s, um, we are leaps and bounds ahead in terms of people's overall awareness as to what this issue is all about. In my experience, let me start there. My experience has been in the presentations that I do, and I do them on a lot of different levels. I do them locally here in Toronto and Mississauga, where I live, at local libraries and service agencies and clubs and so on. And I'll speak before 15, 20 people or 400 people. And the question always comes up, how's this going on? What's going on? But over the years, I'm noticing that the audiences that I'm speaking to are a whole lot more literate about it. They're a lot more aware of what's going on. The same audience 40 years ago, it would be a category of illiteracy, essentially, compared to where they're at right now. So overall, the general public is becoming a whole lot more aware of this situation. And that's a good thing, and that's due to the good research that a lot of these researchers have done. The Jim Mars of the world, the Richard Dolans, Timothy Goods, and the list is endless as to what some of these people have done to bring the awareness to the general public. So we are way ahead of where we used to be.
Yeah,
Now, if you look at where we're at right now, we're still not where we want to be because the level of secrecy and obfuscation that's going on is still unhealthy. It's not a good thing that's going on. And as I alluded to earlier in the program, the government still has a bit of a stranglehold on this information, and that's not a good thing. And I think that the whole idea of human rights comes into this. And we see the aspect of human rights being raised so often with respect to every single issue that the planet is undergoing right now. Is it our human right to have to breathe clean air? Yes, it is.
yeah,
Is it our human right to have good government? Yes, it is. Is it our human right to be respected as individuals, irrespective of our sexuality or our political identification? Yes, it is our human right. And the whole idea, and this is going to be a little bit more deep than I wanted to go into, but if you look at, and I think it's a very key point here, Mike, that if you look at the idea of human rights, okay, rights is a very slippery kind of thing. We tend to think that, well, you've got a constitution. Countries have constitution, and
yeah,
within the constitution, they build in these things called, human rights, and the governments give people their human rights. You can do this, you can do that. You're free to do this. They give us the right to do the things that we think we should be able to do just because it's our right to do it. They give us those rights. That's what we call donative rights. They give us, they donate the rights to us. And the fact of the matter is that if a government has the capability to give us those rights, they also have the capability to take them away. And that's what's happened here. Categorically, our human rights, in a lot of ways, have been taken away from us through the secrecy with respect to this issue. We have the right to this information. Now, the other side of to that rights argument is the idea that we have the natural order of rights, those rights that we have just by the fact that we were born to be a human being. As soon as someone is born into the human family, you automatically have certain rights. No one gives them to you. You've just got them because that's just the way things are. You have the right to breathe air. You have the right to keep your heart beating. You have the right to food. You have the right to all of these things. And this issue, this issue of where we are in the cosmos and whether or not we are alone in the cosmos or together with other species in the cosmos, it is our natural right to know that. And no government can tell us that it isn't our right to know that. And that's the crux of this matter. And it's something I feel very, very strongly about. And that's why the idea of secrecy and the obfuscation and the mismanagement of this whole issue really lies. We have the natural right to know this. And any government that says that we do not have the right should be shot to death
Yeah.
immediately or tied to a cow's tail and pissed to death. I'm sorry to say that. But that's not, no, that's how strongly I feel about this, Mike.
I agree.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
That's it's kind of a gross way to put it, but a lot of people understand that better than rhetorical phrases.
Yeah.
And that's the fact of the matter. We are a human family, and we have that right. Everyone from the highest level of economic income to someone sitting in a canoe off the coast of Madagascar fishing for food. They have a right to know about it. Whether it makes a difference to them or not, that's not the question. But eventually they have to know that A, we're not alone in the cosmos. And second of all, that whoever's in the cosmos that has the intellectual and technological capability to get here are engaging us in many, many different ways. And then there's the fact that this engagement could lead to, and probably will, when the cards are all on the table, could lead to very good things to happen on our planet with respect to our use of energy, to respect to things like borders, money, all of these things. They'll call everything into question.
Oh,
And we could get into the idea of money and borders, and I think borders on the planet are one of the worst things could ever happen. It separates us. It separates people. Now, do these do these off-world civilizations functioning at the highly sophisticated level that they're at? Do they have borders on their planet? Do they segment their planet into sections where you can't go there anymore? Or if you go there, we're going to start a war with you? These are all what I call extinction behaviors, and we are engaged in so many different forms of extinction behavior. You name it. It's from the climate that we're infecting to money and greed and the
yeah.
whole isolationism. These are all extinction behaviors.
Well,
But if we perpetuate them, Michael, we will in fact become extinct. And maybe that's what they're here for, to either monitor what's going on and watch us extinct ourselves. They could be doing that, or
yeah.
monitoring it to a point where they say, okay, we've had enough. We're going to, as you said earlier, why don't they just show themselves to us? They may do that one day, because
Well,
I really feel that we are a species worth saving, and I think that's one of the things that they recognize. Now, that's a whole lot to kind of digest over the last 2 or 3 minutes that I just said, but I think it's a very important aspect that we do have a right to know all about this, and that it will, in the long run, benefit us.
right. A couple things here. One, it seems like when you read past scriptures and stuff that there's indications that they used to show themselves to us and they used to
Hmm.
interact with us.
Hmm.
And then as far as us being so separated on this planet, I think I don't think it would be such that way if we weren't the truth wasn't so manipulated and people weren't lied to. You've got so many different belief systems around the globe that
Hmm. Hmm.
it's like putting dogs in the kennel with cats. They just can't get along. And as long as we're like
Yeah.
that, I can't see us going anywhere in the cosmos.
Well, you've struck a really fine note right there, Michael, because one of the things that we talk about all the time when I talk about this with my fellow researchers, and that's the whole idea of nuclear weapons, as used as an example. And that's going to lead us into some of the things that are going on right now with respect to the government's investigation into what the UAP are all about. And there are a number of people who are of the firm belief that this stuff called nuclear armaments and the whole nuclear energy, for example, nuclear energy as an energy source and as a weapon. And one of the things that some of the contactees are talking about, and some of the researchers have postulated, is that um, whoever these beings are realize that we have the capacity not only to extinct ourselves, to destroy our planet and make it a wasteland with respect to nuclear war. We all know what will happen if that does occur.
Yeah.
We seem to be on the precipice of that right now. In any case, if we as a species are able to gain the capacity or develop the capacity to travel the stars. Okay, let's suppose that we do on our own, without any help from anybody else, develop our own mechanisms for traveling, out into the cosmos, far into the cosmos, not just to another planet, but out deeply, and take our weapons with us. Okay, these nuclear weapons. Uh, Many people are of the opinion that if we do in fact develop this intergalactic, let's say use that word, intergalactic capacity to travel the stars, and we take our nuclear weapons with us, these highly advanced, highly intelligent civilizations will not permit it. They will quarantine us. They will not allow us to take our weapons of war out into space with us and create the same kind of mess that we're creating on our own planet. So that's one of the things that some of these researchers and some of the contactees who've actually had interactions with these off-world situations, civilizations, that's what they're telling us, that we will not be allowed to take our weapons of war out into space with us. So that in and of itself is sort of I guess, a cautionary note that we've got to get our act together. And we've got to figure out a way to eliminate these extinction behaviors that I described earlier, one of them being nuclear weapons, and somehow figure out how to control it or eliminate it to the point where we're no longer a threat to ourselves and we're no longer a threat to the other people in the cosmos by taking our simplistic nuclear weapons out into space and causing all kinds of havoc
Oh
out in the
yeah.
cosmos.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, and I think
that's
that
important, I think.
I think they've demonstrated that they could shut those babies down at a
Easily,
blink
easily,
of
yeah,
an eye if they
yeah.
want to.
Well, see, the thing is too. I mean, on that same line of reasoning, Michael, if we take, for example, the thought process, the thought experiment of saying to ourselves, okay, what if there are other planets out there, and there probably are, other planets that are less sophisticated than us? They're out there. They're
Yeah,
operating at a level of existence, uh, that we operated on, maybe 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, and we have an opportunity to engage them if we gain this capacity to move to their planet.
we would try to
But
control them.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's the whole thing.
yeah,
We would take our extinction behaviors with us and
yeah.
influence them. And so that's one thing. And the other aspect to that is what have these extraterrestrials, these off-world civilizations, what have they done with those civilizations? Have they left them alone? Have they interacted with them? Have they advanced themselves to these people in a less sophisticated or more sophisticated way? Have they disclosed themselves to those less sophisticated civilizations? And then you've got the other level of advancement, other planets out there that are of similar development as we are. Have they interacted with them before? And what's the scenario there? So there's all kinds of nuances to this whole question of what happens when we engage ourselves beyond our own geocentric orbiting of our sun. What do we attempt to take our extinction behaviors with us? What are they going to do about it? I don't think they're going to intervene here. I really don't. I shouldn't say that. They just might. But the war in Ukraine, for example. Okay,
Yeah.
that's an absolutely abhorrent situation where one government can infest another country's being with control in the way that the Russians are doing. Absolutely deplorable. They should not be able to, but it happens. Now, do we have to overcome that kind of behavior? What do we have to do to eliminate that, to show whoever these beings are that we are worth saving, that we can get our house in order, if that's in fact what they're looking for. And if they do see that, then the likelihood of them stepping in and saying, "Hello, we're here now. We're glad you're getting better,
Yeah.
and now we're gonna make a move to tell you a few things that you might want to know. Are you ready for this, folks? Because if you are ready, it's going to be a big slap in the face for you. Okay, so get ready for it, and it's not going to be pretty. This whole thing called disclosure ain't going to be pretty. Okay,
No,
it,
it's not. I mean, look at the
it's not going to be pretty.
religious aspect of things. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people with torches thinking, "Hey, the demons have landed." I mean,
You bet.
you're going to get all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
Oh, it's going to be just it. I don't know any way around that unless whoever these beings are, collectively or individually, unless they have a way of contacting civilizations like us that make it a little bit easier. Maybe they've got a way around, the mass riots that you just described. Maybe there is a way that they have of interjecting their being or their presence to us in a way that won't be threatening. I don't know. It's they're so highly developed that they just may in fact have a way that won't scare the hell out of us, but will make sense. Now, what that is, I can't even conceive of it. Maybe there is a way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, people have speculated that they're out to destroy us or eat us and all these different things, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's been going on for so long. Why
Mm.
wait? If
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
wanted to get rid of this ant hill, they could have done it a long time ago.
Long time ago, for
Yeah,
sure. And that's another thing that really kind of plagues me a lot in terms of what they might be up to. And if they've been here, if they've been engaging us for so long back in biblical times and even before that, or as long as in history as you want to go back, if in fact they have been part of our existence in ways that we don't understand or that really haven't been manifested in the way we think it has been, why not come in and take us over? And why just, there may be species out there that have the capability of doing it and could have done so a long time ago. Because there are a lot of theorists and researchers that say there are a lot of bad guys out there too, and I don't know if that's true or not. But if the
yeah.
bad guys are really out there, and if they're as strong and as powerful and as intellectually advanced as we seem to think they are, they could have had us for breakfast a long time ago.
I
So,
think
you
that
know,
they're probably. I mean, there's a yin and the yang, right? I mean, there's got to be bad intention ones out there too. Now that would tell me though, what's keeping them from doing bad things, and heck, maybe they are, and we
mm,
don't know it. I mean,
yeah. Are
uh,
there yeah,
yeah,
are there competing forces out there that that are in fact controlling the scenario that you just described? That there may be forces, negative forces out there that are being balanced off by positive forces. And when you look at things, in a cosmological sense, uh, anything, anything is possible. Anything is possible. There's nothing that, like I said earlier, it's a thought that's never been thought before. Things
yeah.
will happen that we could never even possibly imagine, and that could be one of them.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that. I've said it too. If you could think about it or think it up, I'm sure it can be
It,
done. I mean, it's just a kind of weird universe we live in where anything's possible. I'm finding
mm,
out, and abductions. What about abductions? I've talked to a lot of people who on this show who have claimed to be abducted. Some who I really believe were abducted.
mm.
Travis Walton being one of them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so what's that all about? And the cow mutilations. I'm thinking, how many cows have to be mutilated before they get the
Yeah,
information they're looking for? So
that they want. Yeah, that's another story altogether. I
maybe
mean,
they're
my
eating them.
goodness,
I don't know.
yeah. Well, that particular aspect of this whole thing, that particular behavior by whoever's doing it, um, I think points to a specific species that may be interested in it. So that's just my take on it. But that's
Yeah,
I don't think they're all doing it. I think there may be a species that's interested in that kind of stuff, and there may be species that are interested in other kinds of things that we're doing. So it points to the fact that we are being engaged by a number of
yeah,
offloads, and but the idea of the abduction phenomenon And I'm glad you mentioned Travis because here in Toronto, for I think 3 or 4 years in a row, we had the Alien Cosmic Expo here in Toronto, and Travis was one of our major speakers at two of these events. And I got to know Travis quite well, both here in Toronto, and then I spent a year in Australia where we both spoke at a conference back in 2003. In any case, the whole idea of what he went through and what these contactees have gone through is something that has to be reckoned with, and it's all part of the evolution of how this thing becomes acknowledged. Because right now, the acknowledgement of the UFO phenomenon is one thing, and it's made great strides since since the early 50s. It's made huge strides in people's understanding of it. You can now talk about UFOs in a way that makes sense to people. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's possible. I saw one too, and yeah, I'm not really that close-minded, but it's possible. Yeah, that kind of discussion goes on all the time, no matter where you go. I go to restaurants, for example, and I sit with friends of mine, and we're having dinner, and there's 8 or 10 of us sitting around a table, and we're all talking about this kind of stuff. So I say to them, okay, we're sitting here having dinner right now. There's 6 or 7, 8 of us right now. We're talking about UFOs. Take a look around you in this restaurant of other maybe 8, 10, 12, 15 tables. How many people at these tables that are sitting around are talking about the stuff that you and I are talking about? Are they
Yeah.
talking about what you and I are talking about? The chances are they're not. But if you went up to them, if you got up out of your seat and you went over to them and said, "Can I just ask you a question for a second? Pardon me, and put your fork down and leave your spaghetti alone just for a second." Have you ever thought of this idea or this possibility of UFOs or aliens? Have you ever given any thought to that? Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I believe that. That's quite possible. Ask that same question 50 years ago, you'd have got a different answer. Right now, people are more ready to talk about this issue. So we've come a long way with respect to how this thing has unfolded. And then how has that happened? Well, it's happened in a repetitive sense. We brought it forward. Researchers have written books about it. It's been in the media. It's been, people see it on TV. These all kinds of UFO shows on television. But the one thing that really has not come forward in a way that makes the phenomenon acceptable is the abduction phenomenon. That has still taken a back seat, and maybe it's more difficult for people to internalize that kind of intrusions into our realm as human beings. They're not really willing to accept the fact that it's possible. UFOs, yeah, sure, for sure, no problem.
Yeah.
I think that's people being taken, experimented upon, hybrids, the whole story. No, I can't go there just yet. I think that's definitely a mindset among a lot of people right now. But it's all part of the evolution. One day, the idea of people being taken onto these craft and experimented upon, or at least and given information in a positive way. I think that eventually will make itself known in the same way that the UFO phenomenon was, in fact, a bizarre notion and sort of a taboo. But the abduction phenomenon is going through that right now, and eventually the abduction phenomenon will become a recognized feature of this entire phenomenon. As difficult as it is, and I've talked to a lot of abductees. I've
Me
interviewed
too.
them, I've worked with them, I've counseled them, and these people do not want any notoriety. They're not there. Trying to wave flagging.
Yeah.
They're not doing that. There are some that attempt to do it, but for the most part, most people are sitting in silence and saying, "No, I'm keeping this to myself, and I'll suffer through it, and whatever happens." That's generally the notion. So,
And when I think about abduction and what the abductees have told me that I've spoke with, some of the descriptions they've given me, it almost sounds like how we would be had we found the planet and we got to it and were able to hover around it. That's the kind
yep,
of thing I could see us doing. I mean, we do it in the ocean. We'll
sure.
pull an animal up out of the ocean, chip it,
Mm,
and put it back in, and what are they telling their friends down in the ocean? So there's that, and
yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and people, some people who have been on these ships who claim to be have been on these ships
Hmm.
also describe human-like beings amongst grays and other things on
Yeah,
these
oh, for
ships.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, which points. I'm glad you brought that up. Which points to the fact that I alluded to that earlier in the program, because the number of species that are in fact engaging us are almost countless. I would imagine. Some people say there's up to 57 or 60 different species that we are being engaged by. So we really don't know completely who's responsible, and they all may be responsible for it in a different way. I mean,
yeah,
Travis Walton's experience was totally different than some of the people that I've
yeah,
encountered that have actually given me testimonies to what they've been through. And something very interesting that your listeners should know. In 1996, I was a principal of an elementary school for most of my career, for the last 25 years of my career, and in having exposure to teachers and students and so on and so forth,
yeah,
I had the opportunity to have, because teachers knew that I was involved with this. They knew that I was on the radio program and talking about UFOs and everything. They all knew about it. I didn't stand up in the bandwagon every morning and talk about it. I didn't really do that at all. But they got to know that I was, and they would bring me artwork from kids. Um, that that had pictures of UFOs. Okay, that the kids were drawing pictures of alien creatures, and now you can say, well, they might have seen it on TV, they might have read about it in a book or talked about it with other kids. Oh yeah, some of them did in fact do that, but some of these kids, in fact, had real experiences,
yeah.
and believe it or not, I got to talk to two of them because they just wanted to share that. Mr. Viggiani, I know that you're invited. Can I just tell you?